Good morning and welcome to This Week. Brink of war. Russian forces take Crimea. Parliament authorizes a strike on Ukraine. With the world on high alert, will Vladimir Putin expand his invasion?
There will be costs for any military intervention in Ukraine.
But what will those costs be? Does President Obama have the power to prevent war? This morning, answers from Secretary of State John Kerry and our experts, plus live reports from the danger zone.
Thank you, Jay!
Culture clash. That hot button bill in Arizona. Is the governor's veto a watershed moment in the fight for gay rights? Our Powerhouse Roundtable takes on that debate and all the week's politics. Plus, Mr. Affleck goes to Washington. And stat guru Nate Silver cracks the Oscar code. All right here this Sunday morning.
From ABC News, This Week with George Stephanopoulos starts now.
As we come on the air this morning, America and the West are facing the most perilous confrontation with Russia since the Cold War. President Obama spent a tense 90 minutes on the phone with Vladimir Putin yesterday, warning him to withdraw forces from Ukraine. The UN Security Council has been meeting in emergency session, but Russia is not backing down. Its forces on the move in Crimea, surrounding Ukrainian military bases. The new Ukrainian government has put its forces on high alert, too. It is a high-stakes and dangerous standoff, and we begin our team coverage with ABC's Alex Marquardt in Crimea. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, George. When the U.S. says Russia has invaded Ukraine, this is what they mean. These forces we believe to be Russian have completely encircled this Ukrainian base, demanding its surrender. This is happening at other bases in Crimea as well. Russia this morning tightening its grip. A dangerous standoff in Crimea. These well-armed professional troops in full combat gear lining the outer wall of a Ukrainian naval base. No one going in or out. At another base, this commander told us he'd been ordered twice to surrender. But he said his orders were to hold the base and added he was ready to fight. Russian Marines have been seen on the move in Crimea, a region of Ukraine, which is home to Russia's Black Sea Fleet and a mostly Russian population. The U.S. says what is happening is a Russian invasion and occupation and is demanding that their troops withdraw. The UN Security Council met yesterday in an emergency session.
It is time for the Russian intervention in Ukraine to end. The Russian military must stand down.
During a 90-minute call on Sunday, President Putin told President Obama that Russia has the right to defend its interests and Russian people. Other international leaders have joined with the U.S., British Prime Minister David Cameron saying there's no excuse, Canada recalling its ambassador from Moscow. This as pro-Russia fervor sweeps eastern Ukraine. Flags torn down from government buildings. Pro-Russia protesters savagely beating those supporting Ukraine's new government. Ukraine now more divided than ever, and the prospect of war growing ever closer. This is now a high-stakes game waiting to see who moves next. Will Russia complete its takeover of Crimea and move into other parts of Ukraine, or will it bow to international and American pressure? George?
That is the big question. You know, Vladimir Putin's intervention in Ukraine echoes previous military moves into former Soviet republics like Georgia. And this is the latest in a series of challenges to America and the West. So what is behind these moves and where will he go next? ABC's chief foreign correspondent Terry Moran has more on that.
In just a few dramatic days, Vladimir Putin has shown the world two sides of his dominating leadership style as ruler of Russia. First, there was Sochi. The Olympic Games were Putin's personal project, 7 years of work, $50 billion spent, all to send a single overriding message, as he told George Stephanopoulos just before the Games began.
I would very much like, during the Olympics, for the athletes, visitors, reporters, and those who will follow the Olympics on TV through the media, for people to see a new Russia.
Then came Ukraine. After revolution in Kiev, Russian tanks, choppers, and troops moved into Crimea, an older, darker image of Russian power. But Putin has done this before. 2008, Russian troops invade the neighboring nation of Georgia. Putin declares he is defending ethnic Russians there, the same rationale for his moves in Ukraine. The U.S. and European allies object, but 6 years later, Russian troops remain in Georgia. Now, Putin has put the world on notice he is willing to use military force in Ukraine and risk another conflict with the U.S. and the West.
We are on the edge of the not Cold War, but we are on the edge of hot war.
Here's why. Ukraine is a divided nation. Kiev and the west of the country yearn to join Europe and the U.S. and forge a different future, while in Crimea and the east, where so many ethnic Russians live, they look to Moscow. And Moscow has used Crimea as a major Russian naval base for 200 years. On Friday, Obama tried to send his own message to Putin.
That there will be costs for any military intervention in Ukraine.
Hours later, Russian troops were on the move, and Putin was authorizing more.
It's pretty clear that maybe the President of the United States has been a bit naive about Vladimir Putin and his ambitions.
To be fair, George W. Bush did know better managing Putin, even though he declared he'd looked into his soul. The fact is, Putin cares more about being feared than loved in the world, and he cares most about restoring Russia's greatness through pageantry or raw power. His next move, it's clear, solidify control over Crimea and make sure that Ukraine never moves too close to the West or else.